Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our June meeting, our regular meeting of the Shawnee Mission Board of Education for June 25th. And we'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, thank you for being here tonight. We have two separate meetings within a meeting. So the first meeting that I'll open here is the budget hearing. So state statute requires that we have a budget hearing. And with that, this is an opportunity for the public to express any comments that they'd like to and share regarding the budget that's put forward with some updates. With that, I'll open it up. Is there anyone here that would like to speak on behalf of the budget? Besides our CFO over there. Well, thank you. With that, we'll close the budget hearing, and thank you for that opportunity to offer that to the public. With that, we will move to item C, which is considered part 2, and now we are to the regular meeting. These agendas are developed middle to late of the week prior to our meeting, and then as things happen, we update the agenda. And so there's several things that might have changed between the time you first saw this agenda and this evening, so I thought I'd bring up a couple of those real quick as we move through. First of all, as most people that follow this know, that the Kansas Supreme Court came forward with an opinion this afternoon, a ruling, and so we're going to add in our special presentations Dr. Stuart Little, who will be here to give us an update on that. So that'll be added to the agenda. Also, I'd like to point out that in our HR agenda, we've updated that as well, and it now includes the announcement and the eventual vote this evening on David Smith, who is the candidate that's been brought forward to be our new Chief Communications Officer. So although you saw that in press release perhaps today, the board will be making that decision, and we look forward to that as well. So that was also added to our agenda today. And his start time will be July 5th. I wanted to make sure that folks knew that as well. And lastly, I'll add to that, there's another start date that happens next week, and Dr. Michael Fulton will begin July 2nd. So July 2nd, Dr. Fulton, and then July 5th would be David Smith for next week. And those are two updates that I wanted to add as we go through the agenda tonight. With that, I will turn to Dr. Southwick for the interim superintendent's report. Dr. Southwick.
Yeah, thank you. Summer's off to a great start in the district. A lot of activities going on across the district for our students, even though the school year has ended. Students participating in a wide variety of classes designed to help them explore the world around them through summer enrichment. Recently, an engineering camp was held at the Center for Academic Achievement. It was designed specifically so that middle school students could build, design, and learn more about engineering. Soon we'll be welcoming our kindergarten. As you remember, our Jump Start program has been very successful over the last couple of years. In addition, I would be remiss if I didn't mention we have lots of educators who are out there taking classes this summer and involved in all kinds of enrichment activities on their own to help them be better prepared to address the needs of students for next year. So we appreciate that very much. We're just glad that there's lots of opportunities for our students across Shawnee Mission School District. A few of them we mentioned at early meetings in terms of the meals that we provide, but not just the meals, but activities all across the district. So school never ends. It's a 12-month proposition. Students from placed at our National Forensics League tournament, a team of Shawnee Mission Northwest students earned one of the top prizes at the National Catholic Forensic League Grand National Tournament. Julian Kufor, a senior, and Emmanuel Osei, a senior, took second place in the national tournament in policy debate. The team also won the state two-speaker KSHSAA championship earlier this year and is coached by Ken King. Shawnee Mission East, Shawnee Mission Northwest, Shawnee Mission South, and Shawnee Mission West were also represented at the tournament. Happy to announce that Jerry Heil has been named the 2018 Teacher of the Year for Excellence in Braille Instruction. This is a national honor given to Braille Institute for her dedication, innovation, and creativity in the teaching of students who are visually impaired or blind. Hal is a full-time teacher for students who are visually impaired. And Jerry was nominated by a family of one of her students. They said that their daughter's success in school came as a result of Jerry's dedication and teaching skills. So very proud of her and what she does for our students that are visually impaired. Another district administrator, we announced 2 last week. We've got another one this week, has earned their doctorate. We're pleased to congratulate Leah Cogswell, who attended her doctoral degree, earned her doctoral degree this spring. She's an associate principal at Trail Ridge Middle School. She earned her doctorate in education leadership and policy studies at the University of Kansas. And as you know, that's something that we work with all of our young administrators to pursue those advanced degrees as well as our teaching staff. So we're very proud of Leah. Dr. Hubbard has recently been elected to the Acacia Board of Directors. As you know, Dr. Hubbard serves as the Assistant Superintendent for Leadership and Learning and has been elected to serve on the Kansas State High School Activities Association Board of Directors. Acacia is comprised of more than 350 high schools and 400 middle schools in Kansas. And administrator does the administration for all the interscholastic programs. She was actually selected by the Sunflower League as a result of her experience to represent that group and our conference for the state. So very proud of her too. I had an opportunity, that's me kind of on the end there, to sit with a lot of distinguished educators as we signed the agreement for Degree in 3. And multiple school districts were there. Raytown, Lee Summit was there. We had Kansas City, Kansas, Olathe. We had Johnson County Community College, Metropolitan Community College, and of course, KU Edwards campus. And the Degree in 3 gives our students an opportunity with coursework that they take in school. If they follow up with an associate's degree with ours that we have, also with the junior colleges that participate, and then they can have their degree conferred in 3 years through the Edwards campus. So it's a great opportunity for our students. We kind of joked around, it's not a degree in 5 or 6, it's a degree in 3, which we think is in the best interest of our students. So Shawnee Mission students that will be able to enter the program through several district signature programs, our biotech, our pre-law, and our public administration. So we were happy to be a part of that. It was kind of a dream of Dr. Cook 2 or 3 years ago that he was able to bring the people together and make that happen for students across the area. Last thing I have tonight is just a little bit of an update on our construction projects, the 3 that you see there. Lenexa Hills is absolutely on schedule to open up in the fall. And Bob's attended several meetings over the last weeks. We have furnitures in the building. We're waiting for the AT&T to turn the phone on in the elevator so we can move the furniture upstairs. And I think we have an open house on July 22nd. Is that, or 23rd? Do you remember, Bob?
I don't remember the exact date.
Okay.
They set it up for the parents of the new students.
Okay, so we'll be able to get those students in there several weeks before we start to kind of acclimate to the building. We won't do our dedication of the building until after school starts. It'll probably be in September or October. That's kind of the plan that we're looking at right now. We're excited about that. In addition to that, Brookwood continues to make progress. We're hopeful, Bob didn't want me to announce, but we're hopeful that we could be there over winter break, but at the very latest it will be spring break. I think the students and staff and parents have been very happy at Indian Creek, but they'll be happy to be back in their own building. So that building is going well also. And the Aquatic Center, if you had an opportunity to go out on 87th Street and see the Aquatic Center, it's making great progress. We've got concrete walls up and the bleachers are in the stands now. They will start in the next week or so putting in the massive wood beams that will support the ceiling and the structure and put it under roof. As a reminder to the board, that facility will not open up until about a year from now. It'll be in the summer of 19. The last piece of it is, Bob and I visited a little bit today. We've got millions of dollars worth of roofing projects and HVAC projects, and and driveway and parking lot projects. We're finishing up some of our turf projects as well. The elevator that you all approved for us to put in over at Indian Hills is underway. So a lot of work on our buildings. I would just give you this little caveat: the work's not going to be done for a long time. We've had some aging infrastructure, but really proud of the work that we've been able to put together. Bob and his staff, and the architects and the construction workers that we've had that have done great jobs for the Shawnee Mission School District. So I think it's all a plus. And that, we do not have an all means all-star for this month, so that concludes my report.
Great. Thank you very much for the update. And with that, we'll move on to item E, which is our special presentations. As I mentioned earlier, we're glad to have Dr. Stuart Little give us an update with a thorough, in-depth analysis of an opinion that just came out at 3 o'clock today. Thank you for being here and welcome.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk real briefly. The opinion was on the Gannon School Finance decision was released at 3 o'clock this afternoon. Dr. Southwick called me at 3:17 to ask what I thought. So luckily, this...
It wasn't screening his call.
That's right. Luckily, it was only a 39-page opinion, so that counts for a lot. I sent the opinion over, and I'm sure you all have seen it. I'm going to briefly hit kind of 5 high points here that I have from this, and I'll talk about each of those, and I'll be happy to answer questions. Number one, the court, following up on the 2017 legislative session and the decision that they made in October of 2017 that the funding formula that the legislature put together was not constitutionally compliant in terms of equity or adequacy, the legislature went back in and came up with the 2 bills that they passed this legislative session. And the court had its decision, and they, so that was the point number 2 then, is that the opinion concluded that the equity issues had been addressed, and that there was that the formula as amended by those bills was constitutional. The second part of that, they recommended that, or they concluded that the adequacy was not constitutional, but that the 3 bills over the last 2 years that comprise the current formula were going to be temporarily allowed to remain in place while there was a fix that was created. They identified one issue that needed to be fixed, and that's point number 3. The fix is that there was no inflationary factor that was built into the 5-year funding plan that the legislature put together. And so they have suggested the wrong word. They have told the legislature that they need to go back and put together a solution that will add an inflation component to that formula, and that it needed to be done by, I think, the 15th of April next year, so it'll give the 2019 legislature the time to do that. They scheduled oral arguments for May, and they would render a decision before June 30th of next year. So they identified one issue that needed to get fixed, told the legislature how to fix it. The fix itself is, I'm sure Dale Dennis and other smart people are trying to calculate exactly what would be required to satisfy that inflationary factor, to add that into the formula. There have been press accounts that have ranged from over $50 million to $400 million, but keeping in mind that you're going to add that inflationary factor, it would go every year, and so it's whatever's going to be added will go every year and be added in. I think the $400 million, I think, is for the whole package. One of the issues is that the inflationary factor, and the court talks about this in the opinion. There's a chart that talks about the inflation factor that's calculated from, I think, 2010 through 2017, and it averaged out to about 1.4%. And so over that course of time, so if we're at that same kind of inflationary rate, I think the increase that they'd seen was somewhere in the $50 to $60 million range. So I think just extrapolating from what inflation had been and what they would have thought it would have been those prior years, it's somewhere in but if cumulatively, and of course that gets built into the base, so it's going to be somewhere in that kind of range. So I think it's not a big lump sum that the legislature needs to come up with. It's something that's going to be added in over the course of time going forward. The fourth point to note, I think, of some significance, and as I've read over the opinion again a couple more times and have seen some other conversations, it is worth noting that the court did accept $522 million over 5 years. They said that funding formula, you have to add that inflation component. And then they accepted that going back and using the last constitutional base at Montoy was acceptable, that they would take that going forward. They just said you need to add that inflationary factor going forward, and that all the other components of the formula, the various things that we talked about and had been debated for the last couple of years, are all constitutional. They didn't identify other things other than an issue with virtual school funding and how that was counted in there and whether it was or not. So it's worth noting that the court did that, because kind of my last point would be, we spent a tremendous amount of time and energy in the legislature and the process bringing in the consultants to do West Ed, to do studies on what the costs would be. There was a great deal of time that was occupied with how will we achieve graduation rates, improvement there, outcomes, and those kind of things. And I think one thing that's worth noting in this opinion, because I think it's been talked about as thus far, and if Twitter counts as conversations in the most part, but that the legislature has failed to adequately fund schools, or we're going to have to pass a constitutional amendment and fix it. I think essentially what we have here is that the court has accepted what the legislature has sent to them. They did not dive into the studies from that the plaintiffs had argued about, which was, we've got the West Ed study that says you need to add $1.9 to $2.2 billion, and we need to tie how much money we have to graduation levels. That's not part of what the court rendered any opinions on, and it's not, they accepted what the legislature did. And so I think that's going to be significant going forward. So there will be no need for a special session. The legislature will have the opportunity to fix this in 2019. It will cost money. Nobody can say right yet what that's going to mean, but it's not going to be massive. It's not going to be doubling, tripling. We're not going to be in that $2 billion range. It has the potential, if you read the opinion, if you fix the inflation issue, you have addressed every issue with regard to adequacy and equity, and the case should be released at that point. That's what they have, the court has laid out. They have very specifically said what they expect the legislature to do. There will be conversation about constitutional amendment. People were already suggesting that. The constitutional amendment that got out of committee last legislative session, of course, it'll be dead because we'll clear out all the bills and we'll start anew, but was that the Supreme Court could only make decisions on constitutionality with regard to equity, not to adequacy, and it would leave that to the legislature to determine that. I would suspect that will come up as an issue. But in general, the court has accepted the formula as it is, have suggested the fix that they want to see, and while it does have a financial cost, a lot of the other issues that we spend a lot of time and energy on are kind of absent from this decision, and they've kind of narrowly focused down to a solution. So it'll of course, since my job's in Topeka, a lot of this is how does this play into politics and everything. I think it'll have a significant impact on how folks choose to frame the issues and what they see as a solution. So it will definitely have an impact. Who shows up in Topeka in January of 2019 will have an impact on how this is resolved. So I'd be happy to answer the questions that I can, keeping in mind I'm not an attorney, so I'm not giving you a legal opinion on this.
Great, thank you. Any board members with questions? Yes, Dr. Sinclair.
The equity portion of the equity portion of the bill was ruled to be constitutional. Can you remind us what final changes were made that remain in the bill? There were
there was the using prior year to calculate the
sorry, I'm putting you on the spot here.
the LOB. Man, I've got the list here. Using the prior year to calculate the LOB. Let's see. 15%.
I'm sorry, sir.
Uses of the capital outlay. I'm sorry? The 10% floor. So I think there were 4 issues that were left out there when they.
And the 1530?
Yeah, when the ones that weren't technically equity issues that the court had identified, but that we came in was mandating 15% LOB and then requiring districts to use a portion of their at-risk fund, the equivalent portion of their at-risk funds from their LOB to serve those purposes. The court accepted those as well.
Okay, thank you.
Those were the two ones that were added on top of the ones that the court identified. Yeah.
Thank you.
Great. Other questions? Mrs. Mack?
So, except the only new monies we can anticipate, what I hear you saying is inflation. That's the only, so this doesn't really help us in Shawnee Mission a whole lot.
Well, it would be whatever would be appropriated, if it were to be appropriated for inflation, and that would again be for the 1920 school year. So what has been authorized by the legislature and the governor at this point is what we're going to get for the 18-19 school year.
And I'm sorry, I have a follow-up.
Please go ahead, Mrs. Mack.
So when the legislature comes back, tax season will be over. They'll have a better idea, I anticipate, of what overall revenues will be. Is there still an appetite there for gambling or sports betting tax or internet sales tax, I guess, is going to be coming down the pike as well? I mean, I'm thankful because nobody likes litigation, but we're kind of stymied with this. If I hear what you're saying, if I'm analyzing it correctly, I mean, I'm looking at the numbers that we had, and we can do Lenexa Hills, and we can do a little bit here and a little bit there, but we can't do what a lot of us have wanted to do. And so I just want to know if there's more money coming with the legislature into the state and a bigger picture of revenue. Is there any hope that we can have more money on the bottom line of the foundational amount per student, or base state aid per pupil, or whatever you want to call it?
Well, there are, and I've seen, and I don't know if Mr. Knapp, the runs he's done on what revenue will come in this year, what it would mean in the outreach, because there are increases built in over the next 4 years, and then whatever that inflation factor's going to be added in, will be added in after the next year. But otherwise, kind of with this course ruling, the formula kind of is what it is now at this point, and they've approved everything except making this fix for the to add the inflationary resources. So, you know, it's going to be at that point at the will of the legislature and the governor to add any more money beyond that.
Real quick on that, and then we'll get to Dr. Sinclair. And that is, does Dr. Southwick want to comment about the successive years out? I know Mr. Knapp has run some numbers multiple years. Do either of you want to comment to maybe help with that question about what the bill looks like over multiple years and then an inflation kicker?
Yeah, so Russ, you might want to come up, and because you know more of the detail, what we know is in this first year, it's $4.3 million. Just as a note, we were in negotiations today. We were hopeful that there might be more money. We didn't think there'd be less, but now we know what it is, and that's where we'll be this year. There are calculations of what the additional will be next year and the year after and the year after. I think we're close to knowing what that would be on the $522 million, but we don't know what it would be as we add the inflationary money to that. And we begin to benefit, and Russ, you can probably talk in more detail than I can about it. We begin to benefit when we get to is it 44.92? Right. And that triggers additional monies for the LOB for us. And with the inflationary money, we might get there earlier than what we thought we would, and we thought that would either be in year 3 or year 4. So how accurate was I, Russ?
You're very accurate. The base is scheduled to go up $137 for the next 5 years. After we get past 18-19, it goes up for 5 years, and then it goes back to, in years 6, 7, 8, it goes back to consumer price index. So like he said, anything that they add on for inflationary would just add to that. We'll see a bigger increase, I think it's year 4, if I'm correct, when the base does exceed that 44.92.
Thank you. And then Dr. Sinclair.
So it's related in this conversation. So my understanding prior to an inflation adjustment, the increase was supposed to go up, we would hit that 4492 in year 4, but there's a potential, is my understanding, is there a potential to hit that 4492 sooner than that 4-year mark based on potentially with adjustments next year, we could hit that earlier.
Yeah, correct.
But right now it's slated at year 4.
I think so.
So that's where it would.
Mrs. Owsley.
So do we have any guesses on the inflation adjustment, or is that just going to depend on the legislature next year and what they decide to go with? Has anybody calculated anything there? You said briefly that Dale Dennis was maybe looking at numbers or something, but
There are a lot of people, everybody that wants to try, I think, is calculating. And the issue will be, one of the interesting questions will be, if you're going to add 60 months, are you going to bump the base up? Is that, what do you do where do you put that money?
Would not automatically go there.
So
Yeah.
that has all kinds of implications, both in terms of the weightings as well as how quickly you get to 4492. So there's lots of, it seems like it's a small, narrow question, but there's a lot of interesting components to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
We're moving in the right direction.
Okay. Thank you very much for the
Thank you.
update and for being here. We appreciate it on
Thank
such short
you.
notice. Thank you. Before we move off of special presentations, I'm going to take the liberty of, I see our executive director of our Education Foundation here. Is there anything that you'd like to share with us at our final meeting of the school year, since you were so good to be here?
Well, I mean, I'm never going to give up the opportunity.
There you go. There you go.
That just would be against my nature, I guess. No, a quick update for you all, and I think that Mrs. Mack updated you a little bit at the last meeting, but we are right in the middle of our pilot year for Leadership Shawnee Mission, which is going really, really, really well. So we're very excited. We have 12 students that were chosen from among our signature programs, and these are students that have shown incredibly great potential, but perhaps have not had leadership opportunities in the past. So for 3 weeks, they are doing a combination, half classroom leadership work and then half internship. And we found internships for them all over the city that really kind of meld with what they're hoping to study in their future plans. And so the curriculum and the training is all being done by faculty from William Jewell College. So it's a great partnership there. So this is the 3rd week and our students are doing really well. We're getting incredible feedback from their internship sites. And what we've learned is, high school interns are actually a pretty rare thing and people are kind of nervous to have them. And our interns are doing an amazing job. So my only fear is that some of these sites are finding them so incredible that they may convince them to drop out of school and work full-time for them because, and I'm kidding about that, they know the value of an education, but they're doing really great. And Friday, they will be going up to William Jewell College to do additional leadership training on campus there, and then they'll have their graduation that afternoon. So it's going well, and we're really excited to have this program, and we'll report back on what we learned from it. But it's ongoing.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
update. And is there any board members of your board that you'd like to recognize
I do.
here?
I have my board member Chuck Batty is here tonight, so we thank him for being here, and thank you for giving me the microphone.
Great.
I'll sit now.
We appreciate the partnership with the Education Foundations. Thank you for the impromptu update. With that, we move to item F. This is the public comment section where we provide an opportunity for the public to share their thoughts and comments with us. Do we have anyone today? No one today. So with that, we will move on. And we move on to item G, the approval of the minutes. And I'll seek a motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting of May 21st.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Zila. Thank you, Mrs. Goodburn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. Thank you. That passes 7-0. Motion to approve the next special meeting.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Mack.
Second.
Thank you, Reverend Guy. All those in favor of the second item there, the special meeting minutes from May 21st. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. That passes 7-0. We move on to item number 3, which is the regular meeting minutes from May 21st.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Ousley.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mack. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. That passes 7-0. And the final set of minutes is from the special meeting that took place on June 11th. Seek a motion.
Move approval.
Thank you, Mrs. Zila.
Second.
Thank you, Reverend Guy. In a close race there with Dr. Sinclair. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. That passes 7-0. Thank you for that. We move on to item H, which is the adoption of the agenda. I'll seek a motion to adopt the agenda for this evening.
I'll move for approval of the adoption of the agenda.
Thank you, Mrs. Mack.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Sinclair. Any discussion on the agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. And that passes 7-0. We now move on to item I, which is the approval of routine business by consent. I'll first seek a motion to approve, and then we'll seek items to be removed.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Goodburn.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Zila. Are there any board members that would like an item lifted out for further discussion and consideration?
Item K2.
Thank you. Item K2 will be removed and voted on separately. Any other items from the consent agenda? And for everyone, that's the 2018-19 YMCA and JCPRD daycare leases. Any other items you'd like lifted out? Seeing none, we'll approve the consent agenda with that item removed. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes 7-0. We will now flip down to item K2, and this is an item of the annual approval of the 2018-19 YMCA and JCPRD daycare leases. First of all, any questions? Yes, Mrs. Ousley.
So I just had a question. I don't recall which snow day it was a few months ago, but it came up that we don't have snow day coverage with our leases with JCPRD and the Y. And at the time, we had said we were looking into adding that snow day coverage. It was something about us granting permission or something for them to be there, or having maintenance so that the building could be cleared so that they could utilize it. And I didn't see it in the lease, and so I was just wanting to touch base on that contract provision, if that had been updated so that we would have snow day coverage.
I'll do my best to answer that by recollection, and I've also got Bob here. I think what we've agreed to do with both of those, that we will have not all of the sites, but selected sites that would be open that parents could go to, unless it's absolutely catastrophic morning, and then we would not have. But Bob, do you have anything? I know you had worked through that process. And
that contract, so I'm not sure if they added that in there or not.
yeah, I know that was our conversation. And I'm going to be honest, if I knew that was a question, I would have asked Dr. Neal to be here. I sent her home.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Southwick. Just,
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Any other
I
questions?
will, I'll get that answer for you, but I believe that we've agreed to have selected sites open, not all of them, but I'll verify that.
okay.
Great. Any others? With that, I'll seek a motion to approve that item specifically.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Goodburn.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Zila. All those in favor of approving item K2, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes 7-0. Thank you for that. We will now move down the agenda to letter R. This is the action items under business services. And the first item is the approval to amend the budget. This is the amendment to the budget that we conducted the hearing on previously in the meeting, and there were no comments to that. But I'll turn to Dr. Southwick if there's any comment on that as well.
No, I think Ross, working with his department, and Dr. Atha have put the finishing touches on the budget that meets the requirements for us, and I would recommend the approval of the published amended budget for the 2017-18 school year. Just as a reminder, this is last year's budget.
I would move approval to amend the budget.
Great. Thank you, Mrs. Zila.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Sinclair. Any additional questions about the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes 7-0. We now move on to R2, which is the approval of the purchase, the water utilities.
So we're going to purchase utilities tonight for next year. And first of all, our water, and we're asking for the approval, estimated total cost of $350,000 to provide water for the district.
Great, thank you. I'll seek a motion to approve.
Move approval.
Thank you, Mrs. Goodburn.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Mack. Any questions or discussion on the item? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes 7-0. We move on to R3, which is more utilities.
Yes, if we look, and this is our largest utility, the approval to purchase electric utilities during the 18-19 school year at an estimated cost of $9 million.
Great. I'll seek a motion to approve.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Zila.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. Sinclair. Any questions or comments?
I have a quick question, and I know I was not, I was out of town last week, so I'm just assuming that we're building in more money for these because they kind of go up every single year.
Yes.
And do you guys have any idea of percentages or anything rough? They don't have to be perfect, but.
We don't. I talked to Bob about that today, who's made those recommendations. He believes that this number will cover us for next year. I will tell you that Bob was approached last week by an attorney group that's wanting to put together a coalition of school districts to be represented as they look at rate increases. I don't know that that's something we're necessarily interested in, but it's something that we're watching very closely as we look at what KCP&L does over the next couple of years. But in talking to Bob today, believes that this number will cover us for next year.
Good, thank you.
Great. Dr. Sinclair.
I'm going to build on Ms. Goodburn's question. How close have we been every year? I'm assuming the rate increases have been creeping up every year. Are we pretty close at the end of every year on those budget estimates, or?
That's probably a Russ question in terms of what we budget and what we end up having to amend for our electrical. So I don't know without
Well,
pulling
and
that.
kind of all the water, electrical, natural gas, kind of all three utilities in general.
The water will obviously vary based on the weather.
Okay, sure.
Electricity, we can estimate, but sometimes that rate gets approved during the budget year, so we don't have that crystal ball at the beginning when we're approving our budget, and it usually gets approved down the road. I think they're maybe asking in the 5 to 6% range right now to the Kansas Commission, and that still hasn't been approved. And obviously, you'll probably approve your budget before that ever gets approved. But again, they're asking like for 5 to 6%. Gas has been pretty consistent, right around 600,000. We get that pretty close right now. Weather's the mild winters, and we're able to go out and buy the gas futures or whatever, and that's been pretty consistent.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
Additional questions on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. That passes 7-0. Thank you. And we move to item R4, which is the natural gas utility.
Natural gas, we're going to recommend purchase of natural gas utilities during the 18-19 school year, estimated at a cost of $600,000. And I would like to take time to mention that as we put these items together, we always are trying to be conservatively high on what we budget so that we can come in under that. And as we go through the year, we track that. Russ does a good job of that. And if it requires any adjustments in the budget, then we can do that one way or the other. But we're not trying to lowball these numbers, but we're also not trying to make them much larger than what we think we're going to have to spend. So,
Great. Thank you. Motion to approve item R4.
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Mack.
Second.
Thank you, Reverend Guy. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that passes 7-0. Thank you for that. We move on to item R5, which is the approval of the sale of the property. Dr.
Right, so
Shelter.
several months ago, we asked the board for the approval for us to list the warehouse that sits down off of the southern part of our district, off of 435. We had would have been in February of 17, the building appraised, and it appraised for about $2.3 million. We have got an offer that we believe is a legitimate offer of $2.75 million. And we vetted all of that. We're in the final processes, but with the approval tonight, we've got a few things that we'll do before we close, but we will recommend that we sell that piece of property.
Thank you. I'll seek a motion and then we'll have discussion.
So moved.
Thank you,
Second.
Mrs. Zila. And was that Mrs. Goodburn? Thank you. Any questions or discussion on the motion? Yes, Mrs. Owsley.
So the appraisal being at the 3 point, whatever it was, we think that appraisal was too high or was maybe off, or?
So we had an appraisal, which was a real estate firm that did the appraisal for us, that was at around 2.3. I think what you're talking about is the county assessment.
The county assessment, yes.
And
that was
the
it.
county assessment from last year to this year went up 47%.
And that went up for everybody across the board.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of issues that people deal with. As we look at that, again, we still believe that the 2.75 is a good market value for that building. And I don't
So the
think-
assessment was high, but the appraisal value was actually less than what we're
Exactly.
voting to approve the sale
That's
for
correct.
tonight. Okay.
Yeah. And the assessment out there, as you know, it can be assessed. We don't pay any taxes, so,
Right.
you know, whatever happened there, we don't know. But again, in the market for where we are, we vetted it and we think it's a fair market value for the building.
Yes, Mrs. Zila.
And I think I asked you this question once before too, but those extra costs that you said that would be incurred by this sale to us don't amount to much, is that correct?
No, I think we've got, Bob and I looked at that today, we've got some asbestos abatement, which is about, what, 20?
I think all total it's around $10,000 to $11,000 for
Right.
survey, and asbestos and title search.
Great.
For $10,000 to $11,000.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Reverend Guy.
And the proceeds from the sale will go into capital outlay, is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the item, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. And that passes 7-0. With that, we'll move down the agenda to item T, which is the actions from the Board of Education. We have 3 items for our consideration this evening. Each year, we bring forward the approval for renewal of our membership to the Kansas Association of School Boards. That item is $19,736 for the membership. And then additionally, we've included in this an additional $1,500 cost for the season pass, which is allows us to, as board members as well as administrative team members, to attend quite a few training opportunities throughout the year too, rather than paying several $100s every time we attend those. We were afforded a spot on the board as part of our membership, and I'll turn to Mrs. Zila if you'd like to speak to our membership as well.
Absolutely. And I will say, if you've noticed from last year to this year, there was a slight increase in our dues. I think they've held dues static for about 5 years. So they were seeing, just with the costs that they have incurred with the association, that they wanted to raise it just very slightly. And I think the $1,500 season pass, thank you, I couldn't think of the word there, I think that will be great value to us. For a time there, we were kind of very stringent on who would go, and now this opens it up. It's basically a blank check, and anybody can go to any event that they have, barring convention. That's the one thing where they would charge an admission to, if you will, a fee to attend. But I think it's a good value for the amount of good guidance and representation that they give us through KASB.
Thank you. Dr. Southwick?
Yeah, and I just want to mention that that doesn't just cover fees for the board to attend, but any conference that they might have providing services for administrators or teachers in the district, that free pass covers them as well. So as we move forward with our relationship with the organization, which I think we have over the last year, there'll be lots of opportunities for not just the board, but for our staff to go at no cost as well. So.
Thank you, and I envision as we begin a new year with Dr. Fulton, he would take full advantage of that as well. Any other questions or comments about the renewal of our membership?
I think it aligns nicely with the research on highly effective school boards and that relationship between the district leadership and student achievement. One of those pieces is that the board is actively engaged in ongoing professional development. So if this allows us to do that as collectively or as individual board members, I think that's a benefit to our district. So I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else?
Yes.
Mrs.
I would
Zila.
just add one other benefit, and that is that it brings together school boards from all across the state of all different varying sizes and outlooks and that sort of thing. And I think that's a wonderful thing for all of us to share. They have kind of their eyes open a lot to what we face, and they're surprised lots of times. And it's good for us to be aware of what they're dealing with as school boards in outstate Kansas as well.
Thank you. Anyone else about the membership? Seeing none, I can't remember if I already had a first and a second on
Nope.
that.
No.
Seek a motion. Thank you.
I'll first.
Thank you, Dr. Sinclair.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mrs. Zila. All those in favor of the renewal, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. That passes 7-0. We move on to T2, also with KASB. They offer up a service that's an additional $2,100 per year, and that allows us to access their legal team or their legal resources. It allows each of the members of the board as well as the staff to call into them if there's certain legal items that we aren't able to address at the local level. So this is something that we have the option to add on to, and we're proposing that we take advantage of that service as well. I'll seek a motion first, and then we'll have discussion.
I move approval.
Thank you, Mrs. Mack.
Second. Oh.
Thank you, Mrs. Owsley.
Yes.
Any discussion about this additional service of the Legal Assistance Fund available through KASB? Yes, Mrs. Owsley.
So I just wanted to ask, so this is just for the counsel that we received from KASB, and then next month we'll be reviewing the counsel that we received from various firms, and we're reviewing that on the 9th, and then we're voting on it on the 23rd? Is that how that is working out, or?
No, and I turn to my fellow board members to correct me, but I believe the answer is that is one of the items that an organizational meeting we do approve, is the list of legal counsel that we'll be engaging for the year. So that will be separate from this resource. Those would be additional law firms or individual attorneys that would also be part of that list for our consideration. This is an additional service that allows each of us individually as board members to reach out to them to get opinion or advice above and beyond what you're talking about, where we have other firms, individual attorneys that provide legal services to the district.
Okay, so that we do approve that on the 9th then?
Yes, we do.
Okay, all right, thanks.
It
Mrs.
includes
Goodberg.
staff members as well, too, Dr.
Yeah, that's what I was
Southwick.
gonna
This includes staff members to be able to call if they need a quick legal opinion
It
about
does.
something.
Generally, I'll tell you one of the ways that it's helped us is sometimes when we're looking at going a direction, it's great to be able to make a phone call and to bounce that idea off, and we get a sense of what's going on around the rest of the state. So again, as we said, this $2,100 is not going to defend you, but it does give you an opportunity to seek advice and to make some decisions on a day-to-day basis, and it's a great value. And I would remind the board that you approved this last year, and we did take advantage of it this year. So
We did. Yes, Mrs. Mack.
I would add one more thing. I know we've talked about the board manual over time, and this is something that needs to probably be changed in the board manual, because if I recall, what it says now is that only the president is allowed to seek legal counsel. And with this, with KASB, each one of us can call KASB if we pass this tonight.
Great, thank you. Make a note of that. Other questions or comments about the motion? Yes, Mrs. Zila.
I would say, in particular, KASB and their legal counsel, they are very good as far as policy questions. If we need to change a policy, if we need to add a policy, some guidance in that, I think they've done a great job with that and helping.
They have seen our phone number on their caller ID a couple times this year, yes. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay. That passes 7-0. Thank you for that. And with that, we move on to action item T3, staying on the theme of KASB. As we've referenced, the annual meeting, or I'm sorry, the organizational meeting that's required by statute each year of every Board of Education takes place in early July, and ours is July 9th. And at that meeting, we will have the election of officers. We also go through the process of selecting who will represent us in the various committees that KSB affords us as part of our membership. I have sent a proposal to the board for their consideration and then discussion today. Last year, we put together a process where we put forth nominations for those that would be interested in serving as the president or the vice president of our board, the school board here. And there's an additional positions that are also up for consideration. And so what I'm suggesting is that we include that same process for the selection of our Board of Directors member to KSB, our Legislative Committee member to KSB, our Nominating Committee member to KSB, Government Relations Network member to KSB, and then also each year we're afforded a representative spot with SMAC, our Shawnee Mission Area Council of PTAs. And so these are each roles that the board members serve. They represent the school district. And so I put forth in the email my rationale to that is so that we would have the opportunity to select the representation on all of those. But before I seek any action, I'll just turn to you for questions and clarifications because there's a lot of history with our relationship with each of these organizations. And so I'll turn to all of our members to offer up comments and thoughts there. Yes, Dr. Sinclair.
I'm sorry, I should have thought of this sooner. Is it possible to show this document up on the board? It's not. Okay, sorry. Okay.
Tech issues.
Yeah, and I did not mention this as part of the board manual, and so this would be under the nomination section and election of board officers in the board manual. Yes.
I
Mrs.
believe
Goodburn.
that the board, KASB Board of Directors candidate, don't they want you to serve 2 to 3 years? Isn't it a 3-year term?
It's KASB actually has a 3-year term for people on the Board of Directors as well as on the Legislative Committee. And they turn over, kind of a few turnover every year, so they don't have an entirely new group. And we are our own region, so we can do basically whatever we want. Those regions that comprise many, many school districts get together, hopefully at the conference time in December, and that's when they're together to elect possibly new people as they come up every 3 years. So, I mean, we have that opportunity. In the past, we've kind of looked at it as an annual thing almost, but having been on the Legislative Committee and then on the Board of Directors now, I can see kind of their method and that it makes sense that they have, you know, ongoing people that kind of pull up those that are coming on new. So it makes sense truly, I think, maybe to keep that in mind anyway, to be mindful of that is their purpose of why they ask that. You're actually given, like, your term is up, you know, in 3 years, whenever that 3 years might be when you join one of those two committees or directors, boards. So that's just a fact to throw out there. I know we've had board members in the past say, well, we're our own region. We can do whatever we want, which is true. But I think as the association, I think it helps them and their cohesiveness and just like the first year I was kind of during the headlights, they were talking about all their pension stuff that they were changing from defined benefits. And I was like, okay. But now I kind of get what the process has been. And just for an example there. And legislative too, you kind of get the process of how they are moving through their whole platform and changing that each year and the type of input that comes from all different folks from all over the state for that. So that's my 2 cents about the term.
But in the, like, nominating and governmental relations and SMAC could be 1 year. I mean, there's no, they don't really require that or want that for the other positions, right?
I don't believe so. And even nominating committee, I don't know if Patty, were you on nominating this year?
Yes, this last year.
Okay, did you feel you gained some knowledge or expertise of how to go about the nominating committee? Usually there's one person, so it's not a real, hard, difficult decision normally. But that's not always the case, I'm sure. But those are a little less, intensive as far as like, experience level.
And time commitment.
And time commitment, correct.
And one other thing, sorry to,
Yeah.
for the SMAC representative, is there any way, Mr. Stratton, we could reach out to them and find out when they're going to be having their meetings? Because last year they had them in the evenings. Prior to that, they had been having them during the morning hours. That would just be, I think, some good information for our board members to know prior to putting their name in when they're going to be having their meetings this year.
Thank you, I will. And Dr. Sinclair?
Oh, well, I guess they might know at some point. Having served on SMAC board, I think it changes from year to year and leader and kind of group to group. So I'm not sure they would know until, I'm trying to think when that schedule is set.
This year,
Is it-
the decision to meet in the evening was made by the leadership. So I would agree with you that we probably won't know for sure until we know who the new leadership is. You would know better than I do.
Of
when that's
SMAC.
Of SMAC.
Okay.
Well, if we could try to reach out, that would be
Yeah.
great. And any
No.
I've
nugget
written
of
that down.
information would be great.
I will do
Yeah.
that. I will do that.
Okay.
Any other questions about this? Just one last clarifying reason that I put this forward is in the past, we've had the president put together the slate of folks for suggested consideration. In our new process, we're electing a new board president and a new board vice president. And so this would be preventing this process where perhaps if two people were running for president, they would both be soliciting people for these positions for appointment. This way, each of the board members can select those as well, and that'll all take place at the same time. I hope that made sense. Yes, Dr. Sinclair.
Okay, so for a number of these KASB boards, it's preferred but not required by KASB. And so, but we need to do an annual renewal. And so we would just be cognizant of where people are in their terms. Is that what was?
That's a good
I'm
question.
trying to recap what I heard.
Yeah, and what I'll
If there was a
suggest.
suggestion in there or just an observation, I'm not sure.
Go ahead
It's an
first. Go
observation,
ahead.
Okay.
really. I mean,
Okay.
we do this every year. Every year, KASB will look to us to say, okay, tell me who, because nominating governmental affairs often changes, or government, whatever. Relations, thank you. So those often change over year to year to year. So they just look to us to give us the slate of who's coming. But,
Okay.
right.
But
I
if you
hope
look
that
back at,
answers.
I'm sorry,
Go
if
ahead,
you look
Mrs.
back
Mack.
at the practice of our board, it has changed numerous years. And for example, I stepped in when Deb moved up to the Board of Education, to the Board of Directors. I stepped in her role as legislative. And there was actually some question whether or not when that term
Well, and they actually
expired. And
said,
so,
yeah. They actually said,
So-
you're fulfilling my term. And I was
Right.
like, oh,
And so-
okay. So
I
they're
was like,
still
"Man, I
looking
didn't know
at
they
it
were
in that
3-year terms."
respect. but-
So it nominating, it doesn't matter at all. In government relations, it doesn't matter at all. And in my opinion, it's probably different from Deb's. I've been on legislative committee, and while there may be an inherent, it may be a good idea to have the same person in that for a year or two, given the members of our Board of Education, I can see anybody doing a one-year term on legislative very easily at this point in time, because in the last 2 years, they have gone completely through all of their platform legislatively, and we reviewed everything, so that's already been done.
But they do that every year. They review that platform from A to Z every year. Right.
Can I just,
And part of, I'll clarify and then we'll go ahead, and that is, what we're talking about is the form that we submit. And so to answer one of the questions was, there is some room on the form where you either nominate someone else or yourself to make that point, that in the example of, say, Mrs. Zila, where she'll talk about the years that she did serve currently and would like to continue to do it again, and this is the procedure. This would be a perfect place for someone like she is in her role to explain that, so that all of us, as we consider the folks that we select for our representative, can do that on this form. So that's part of why it's on here as well. And I'll talk about the use of the form in a second. Go ahead, Mrs. Owsley.
so the form will be used twice, once at the beginning of the year in the spring as the year begins, or in at the July 9th organizational meeting, and then potentially again after the election, if different people are seated in that January. Is that
Yes, that wouldn't happen this
cycle, but it would happen the next cycle?
Potentially, it could happen
Okay.
next cycle, which also goes to one of our legislative
just
items
the
that maybe
cycle
perhaps the
being off.
legislature will address
Right.
when we do this. Because right now, we're doing it in the middle of an elected, so the elected term of a board member, we're making a lot of decisions halfway through that, which makes this clumsy.
Right, if you want it to be for a long period of time.
Correct, you'd have overlapping terms.
But it looks like you did add, sorry,
Yes, go ahead, Mrs. Goodburn.
looks like you did add the line at the very end, a vacancy in representative roles to KASB or SMAC will be appointed by the board president to serve out the remainder of the term.
Yes,
So,
right, yeah. If in fact that happens, in another year after this one, when
Then the
4 board
president will
members-
appoint.
Correct, to fill out that year's term for each of these
Okay.
spots. Mhm.
Okay. So, okay.
Except vice president, I guess I would clarify. So it just says the KSB and the SMAC. It wouldn't be for the vice president
Mm-hmm.
office, because that would be separate.
because we didn't brief it last year.
We did,
Right.
we did.
Okay.
All right, any other questions on this process? Because this will be the process that we use at our next meeting, which is the July 9th annual meeting. And just one last clarification before we adopt this form is that upon adopting this form, it'll be sent out to each of the board members on June 26th, which I believe is tomorrow. And then the request would be that these would be returned to the board president by July 6th at 5 p.m. And that's the Friday before the next meeting. That way, all the nominations, self-nominations as well as nominating each other, can be collated, put together, and then sent out to each of the board members so that they have the list or the composite of all of the forms of who is interested in what roles, so they can enter the organization meeting understanding who is stepping forward to serve in each of the roles.
And that goes to you or to Terry Wintering?
Well, that's a good question. So the way the manual was passed last year, it said to the board president. But I am more than open to discussion on that. Because there was discussion on that.
I think that it should go to the clerk of the board, because it would be seen as objective, and, I just think it should go to the clerk of the board. Not that I don't think you can do all that
I understand the
collating
point.
and typing, et cetera, but I think it's a cleaner process if it goes to the clerk of the board.
Others thoughts on that?
The only issue was, is that a Friday at 5 p.m., and Ms. Wintering might have already gone home for the weekend, and to get that out over the weekend
Should we
before
up that to-
Monday.
Working on Fridays. Are you working on Fridays right now?
Yeah.
Well, can we please make it maybe the day before or the day
How about
before that?
Thursday
Because there's no,
fine.
how about
That's up
that
to us.
Wednesday?
Will you
Like
be here Thursday?
there's plenty of time, isn't there?
Fifth?
That's the 4th.
How about
Oh, the
Thursday
4th.
the
Whoops.
5th? It's, yeah, I don't think anyone needs to write long essays, so
Okay.
I think we
So,
can do that.
With
By
with
4.
your approval, we will change that language, because currently it reads that the nomination form is to be completed by the nominating board member and submitted to the board president at least 72 hours prior to the board meeting when the election will take place. So instead, it will be submitted to the clerk, and we will say by the Thursday
Prior to the
at 5
organizational meeting.
p.m. prior to the organizational meeting.
But 2 o'clock would be great, right, Terry? Yeah, that's true. Just submit them as you go. There you
Okay,
go.
is everyone clear on that change? So this will be that rather than the July 6th being the date, it would be July 5th. Glad it's not the 4th. And then by 5 o'clock.
Great.
All right? Thank you for that conversation, and with that, I'll seek a motion to approve these changes to the board manual, which outlines the nomination election process for board officer and committee representation.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr. Sinclair.
No,
That was
it?
me.
Sorry,
That was
Reverend Guy.
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Dr. Sinclair. It's been moved and seconded to approve the changes to the board manual. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That passes 7-0. Thank you for that conversation. With that, we move on to U1, which is the board financial report. Each of you have received the board financial report. Do you have any questions regarding that document? Thank you. Seeing none, we'll move on. And with that, we will move on to V1. We have two items under board comments. One is to talk about next year's calendar. So this is the last official meeting of the board for this school year. And so as we just talked about, the next board meeting is scheduled for July 9th, which is the organizational meeting. At that time, there's a series of things that we approve, one of which is our meeting schedule. That's always ironic because how do you have your first meeting if you don't approve it prior to that meeting? But anyway, we've already set the July 9th as our organizational meeting. But beyond that, there's been discussion at previous meetings about the consideration of 2 meetings a month or some thereafter. So with consultation with Dr. Fulton had consultation with the cabinet. There's been others that have been engaged in this process. There has been the suggestion that 8 of the meetings, we have 2 meetings a month, and then 4 of the months, we have 1 meeting a month. And those are in the email that I sent, and that is that in July, we'd have the organizational meeting, and all we would conduct is that organizational meeting item on the 9th, and then our first full board meeting would be July 23rd. In August, we'd meet on the 13th and the 27th. On the 12th, we would meet on Wednesday the 12th because Monday is a religious holiday. And then in September, we meet on the 24th as well for the second meeting. October 8th and 22nd, November 12th and 26th, December 7th, only once that month.
17th.
Sorry, 17th. You're right. January 14th and 28th, February 11th and 25th. March, we would meet just once, and that's the 25th. April would be the 8th and the 22nd. May would be the 13th and 29th, and June the 24th. Questions about that? We're not actually going to take action here. We officially do the action at our organizational meeting, but questions, comments? Yes, Mrs. Zila.
The March 25th meeting, obviously that's at the end of the month. How does that fall with spring break? Do we know? I mean, is that just immediately after spring break? That's kind of what I'm guessing, but I don't know that. And I'm wondering if maybe that should be earlier in the month because we meet again on April 8th. So that's a very short time span there. So I'm wondering if maybe our meeting ought to be bumped up to be more mid-month. And then, just a suggestion, just a thought, because I'm not sure where that calendar falls.
Great. We're turning.
It's the week of March 11th, is spring break.
Oh, okay. So we return,
Turn on the 18th.
okay.
Is when the kids will go.
Okay, that we're back in session. I was just worried that that was like the Mondays directly after spring break. Thank you.
Right. Yes, Dr. Sinclair.
The May 29th, that was a Wednesday. You had called the other ones out that weren't Mondays. So I just wanted to make sure that was the May 29th date. Is that a Wednesday?
It is a Wednesday.
And that was, right, there was a conflict that
It's
fourth
Labor
Monday?
Day. Oh,
Memorial Day.
sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, just wanted to double check that.
Thank you for catching that. Yes.
And
Mrs. Mack.
you're saying July is you're considering it as one of the 4 months where there's 1 meeting, but actually there's 2 because of the organizational.
But not regular meeting.
Correct.
Correct. We'd be
Okay.
gathering twice, but only one would be a regular meeting.
Correct.
And other than that, it would be December, March, June, and July, if I'm doing this on the fly right here.
And Mr. Stratton, this also changes our meeting time to 6 p.m. from 7 p.m. Is that correct?
Correct. That was a discussion as well. And I've sought input from various groups in the area that would be affected by who attends these meetings. I also turn to you for any additional comments on that suggestion as well.
I think part of the reasoning of wanting to move the meetings earlier is obviously parents with young children would like to get home sooner from these meetings. So the hope is that that's friendlier to our constituents who would like to be able to participate in these meetings and attend these meetings. So we hope that that encourages more people to attend and to be able to stay for the full meeting, because hopefully they won't go till 10 p.m. and later with the 6 p.m. start time.
Thank you.
I would
Other
just
thoughts?
piggyback
Yes.
onto that. I think that's great for the staff members that attend these meetings too, because their workday is not that far from 6 p.m. So that just continues their day. And again, like Laura said, you get home a little bit earlier then, which is always nice.
I think we have to get official comment on the record from our board clerk to this one. 6 o'clock better?
I like that.
All right, there you go. All right. All right, then that will be an item that we'll also address when we approve the calendar at our organizational meeting on July 9th. Thank you for that discussion that we've covered over the last couple of months. I appreciate that. With that, we move on to item V2, which is board comments, and I'll begin with a couple, and that is, number one, I congratulate our 3 new board members who made it through their first semester on the board. We've covered a lot of ground, and we've all made a lot of progress together, so thank you for your service, and hopefully it's been a good first semester with many more to follow. Second, I want to use this opportunity to recognize that this also is the end of the school year, which we wrap up our term with Dr. Southwick serving as our interim superintendent. And by myself, and on behalf of myself and the rest of this board, we thank you very much for your service. You sprung right into action when asked. You've done a great job this year. You're not going anywhere because we have your service going into next year, but I didn't want to miss this opportunity to both recognize your service as our interim as well as our deputy, and to thank you very much for your service. So we appreciate that. Other board members like to add? Yes, Mrs. Zila.
I don't want to belabor the fact either or reiterate what Brad has already said, but I think you have done an amazing job of just keeping the ship steady, being open and honest and genuine with all of our constituents, with our staff, and I thank you for that and your integrity. So it's been a great year with you. Thank you very much for all you're doing. I think you're probably all ready to step back down into that deputy position and happy to do it, right?
Amen.
Yes. Other comments, both about the transition as well as any other board comments? Go ahead.
I would just cut on to thank you, and I would also like to thank Rick Atha, because he stepped in as our, quote, interim deputy superintendent, and I know you all have a good working relationship, and he stepped in on a couple of occasions as well, so I want to give a shout out to him.
And I would be remiss if I didn't thank the entire organization, from board members to principals. This has been a different year, but I think everybody worked together, and we managed it. There were a lot of people that found themselves doing a lot of things that they hadn't planned on doing this time last year, but they never complained about it. So I would be remiss, and you're thanking me. I could not have done it if the entire organization, that's from our teachers, parents, cooks, bus drivers, everybody we have in the organization really pitching in and doing a great job. So I take the time to thank them.
Anyone else with board comments in general? Yes, Mrs. Owsley.
I just have a general comment for folks watching at home or whatever they're doing. I know we had gotten the presentation on the supper program a few months ago, and I know that information was provided to principals so that they can opt into that program in the fall. But I had spoken to a couple of principals just existing in space at different events that are new to the district, so they're just coming on onboarding now, and they had not gotten the information. So if anybody's watching at home, I would just encourage them to reach out to Dr. Southwick or Dr. Atha or the nutrition program to get information on the supper program, so that if they want to implement it in their building, they can, because we do have some transitions happening, and just to make sure that that information isn't lost in the mix. If we can get that money back here to feed kids dinner, I'd be happy to do it. So, and that was all.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Yes, Mrs. Zila.
I have one more comment of an event that I was invited to attend back at the end of May from Congressman Yoder's office, and it was about gun safety, gun permits, gun issues, especially in schools. It was a very interesting roundtable discussion. Representative or Congressman Yoder said that he just kind of wanted to get a feel for what was the feeling around there. There was police chiefs, there was representatives there, there was survivors of Columbine, a woman and her dad were there. There was gun merchants there. I mean, it was a real plethora of different ideas. John Douglas was there also representing the district with a great idea of, he analyzes active shooter situations and stuff and shared a lot of knowledge with that. So it was interesting. I'm not sure that any great, resolution came to at the end of the meeting there, but hopefully Yoder got some very good ideas of very strong opinions on things. We had several students there that were extremely eloquent, And I think I saw a couple of them in picture on the front page of the Star not long ago, and they are very passionate about this and gun safety and permits and gun sales. And I think we have a generation coming up that really knows what they want to see happen in America. And I think Congressman Yoder will sit up and take notice, because they were very, like I said, very eloquent, and very meaningful statements were made there. So it was only a 1-hour thing. It was like you just kind of scratched the surface and we were done. So it wasn't very in-depth at all, but it was an interesting gathering of people.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Dr. Sinclair.
I'm reflecting a little bit on the Gannon ruling from today, and having served how long has it been?
6 months.
It's
One
been
semester.
6 months. It's been one semester, 6 months on the board. But having been on the other side advocating for public education and adequate and equitable funding, and creating those opportunities for district leadership to be able to create those opportunities for kids, I am continue to be optimistic and grateful to be part of the Shawnee Mission School District in a leadership role, to continue to collaborate with our stakeholders to make the most of this opportunity as we continue to reinvest in our public education and our youth of Kansas. And I hope we continue to remind our legislators about the value of that, and be leaders in that voice for our kids, and really work collaboratively with our community of stakeholders to continue to build a strong school district committed to excellence and equitable education opportunities for all of our students. So,
Great, thank you. Mrs. Mack.
thanks.
Well, Dr. Sinclair, thank you for cleaning up after my comments on the Gannon ruling.
It's incremental.
It is incremental, and I want to be optimistic. I am an optimistic person. I'm a positive person, and I know going forward, people want the best for the kids of the state of Kansas, and we definitely do. I also wanted to point out, a lot of us went to the KASB regional meetings, and I know Mrs. Zila and Mrs. Owsley went to, and
Laura was there.
and Reverend Guy went to the meetings
Mary.
here, and Dr. Sinclair, and I know Mr. Stratton and I went to the one out in Olathe, and Representative Rooker was there. And it was an interesting mix of people in the Olathe meeting. There were candidates, there were people just kind of getting their feet wet about what's going on with the legislature and school funding. And the researchers and the speakers from KASB really do a terrific job. And it was very informative. And so I'm really thankful that we have re-upped our membership with KASB. But it was a good meeting, good conversation. And so I would encourage us as we go forward, not only our staff members, but we as board members attend KASB events and seminars.
Right.
Great, thank
I
you.
know-
Yes,
I know
Mrs.
I'm
Zila,
talking
please
a
go
lot.
ahead.
Thank you. I am just glad that Representative Rooker's in our audience tonight when the court decision was talked about, because I know how hard you worked from a year ago, more than a year ago, on all of this. And most of what you worked on came to fruition. And we have benefited, and now we're looking forward to increased funds every year. So thank you very much for your efforts. We appreciate you very much.
Agreed, thank you.
And you too, Stuart, sorry.
Speed reading, speed driving, right?
Anyone else? Yes, Mrs. Owsley.
I just want to note, I appreciate the optimism. I just, as a parent whose child has never attended a constitutionally funded classroom, not once, I'm struggling a little today, and I want to say thank you to everyone who works in the district and who has been with the district for the last 10 years while it was unconstitutionally underfunded, because that absolutely impacted their day-to-day and their work environment. And for all the parents out there who are frustrated currently, I totally get it. So I just want to close on that, because we provide a good opportunity for the kids here, but that is because of the work of the individuals on the ground, not necessarily because of the finances we have received. So that's all. Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Anyone else? With that, I will close us out by saying thank you to my board peers for this opportunity to sit in this chair for the last 6 months. We had a chain of events where suddenly we had new folks sitting at this dais, and we had a seat that I moved into, and thank you for your patience as we went through 6 months of transition. So we appreciate that. But what happened in that period was an awful lot, meaning we jumped in square one, and the new board members and all of us went through the process of vetting and eventually selecting a new superintendent, and a lot of other activities that we covered in 6 months. So I'm proud of you, and hopefully you are all proud of your service at that time as well. You know, we get paid an awful lot, and that is nothing monetarily, but hopefully some satisfaction in the work that we do can bring this district moving forward. And starting with our next meeting, we'll have Dr. Fulton at this table, and I consider that a new chapter for Shawnee Mission. And with that, we are adjourned for the 2017-18 school year. Thank you.
And I might mention that's an hour and 20 minutes, and that's progress.